Hey, are you ready for even more cottage thrift flips? I have found so many great ideas. What you saw on that first title page are the frames I did on part 1 of this series, and I've even got enough that I'm going to do a part 3. But let's start with the Cottage Hat Rack. I was watching a YouTube video, Homeworthy, and they were featuring a little cottage, and way in the background I saw something that just really inspired me. Then the very next day I was cleaning up around my backyard and there was a stack of wood, including this board, that I have no idea. I guess it was used in the remodeling of our bathroom a year ago, and I don't know where this board has been, but it's a primed board, and it already had all that weathered aging on it, i.e. mold. I'm not sure. But here I go with my little crackle stamp, and I'm loading it with some antique wax, probably watered down just a little bit. And I make sure to turn that rubber stamp into different directions. And if you want variation in the intensity of your impression, you can just not reload between your stamps. Just keep pressing it down and it'll get lighter each time you go. I did add some antique wax to it to kind of warm it up and to make it look a little more not just like it had been in the yard for a year, like it was leaned up against the house. I don't even know. All right, these are my hats, my 3 straw hats that I did have. So I'm just laying them up against this board and making a little tiny X where I think a nail should go. Yes, you could get some fancy hooks and that would be really pretty, but you don't have to. And in fact, I knew because there was going to be a small space that I was hanging. You can see that I've put little impressions, outlined it with a pencil where I needed to put my 2 little hangers. It's not going to be heavy. The board's not very heavy, and the straw hats weigh maybe 1 or 2 ounces each. You know, I'm exaggerating. But what I was saying is I'm just going to use nails because I really know that my hats are going to be covering up the point at which they are hanging on to my board. And really only a little bit is going to be showing of the board, but enough is going to be showing that it'll be worth it. So here I go, putting my little thin nails at an angle. Things are stronger at an angle. Don't put it straight out. Let it be angled upward so that someone that's scientific could explain the physics. Did you see me hit my finger? I did. Every time I hammer, I hit my finger. I think I'm impatient. All right, one of my hats already had a leather strap on it, but the other 2, I added some waxed jute string. You could add just cotton twine or rough jute. And on second thought, I probably could have just eased my little nail up into the weave of my hats, because those 2 hats that didn't already have strings, because that's kind of a loose, flexible weave, and you can see there's kind of a chippy place on the side. I don't care. This is decor. If the chippy part shows where it's coming apart a little bit, I'm not offended. I'm okay with that. It just looks like it lived a real life. Okay, so here's the spot where I'm doing it, and it's in my foyer above the mirror. I had to lower the mirror about 6 inches to make room for the summer hats. Spring and summer. Let's call them our spring and summer hats. And I do think that I can use different kinds of decor through the seasons on that board. But, oh, and forgive the fact that we don't have the crown molding up there. Ben's only had 10 years to get to it. Don't tell him I said that. That would break his heart. You know, some tasks you just don't get to, and then you become blind to it. And you're like, oh yeah, we don't have crown molding in the foyer. It's down the hall. It's in other places in our house, but not up there. Okay, well, whatever. There's the cutest little group. of spring and summer hats, and I love it. I'm very much enjoying that. Okay, this was on a whim. I thought that really pretty picture that I bought recently at the Graceworks thrift store of the children crossing the creek, it needs a light. It's a dark picture. So I looked at the ones online and they were so expensive. I said, that's ridiculous. I'm not paying that. I mean, I'm just not going to do it. Maybe I could make one. So I took a wrapping paper tube and the tops off of garlic salt and chili powder. I'm ridiculous, y'all, but this is the way my mind works. I've always been like this. I'm like, how could I do this differently? I did cut. It's not just split open and spread. It's I cut a little section out of that wrapping paper tube because I knew it would need to be wide enough. Oh, we're getting real precise with our work here. This, like I said, this is a whim, and I don't normally do this kind of thing, but I'm telling you what, it did. It worked. Okay, full cart metallic paint. Already had it on hand. It's just part of my paint supplies. Do you see the fairy lights over there? Well, that's also what I had on hand, that I would not have to run electric cord to it to make it be lit. So I'm just using the little strand of fairy lights, which Ben was watching me do all this, and of course I'm sure he must think I'm absolutely ridiculous, but he doesn't make fun of me or anything. He just asks questions or just remains silent, which that's wise. Well, anyway, he said, if you wanted, I could probably order you some LED lights that'd be a little brighter. I said, well, if they're battery and I can suspend them behind this picture on the wall, then that would be great. All right, these big wide craft sticks, I have used these things for so many different projects. Okay, I did get my ruler out so I could find the center of it, and I just put a big blob of hot glue in there and worked my big craft stick into it. And then I put some on the top to keep it in position, because that will be the top. The stick will be the top side. And of course, I'm putting a little extra glue there, hot glue, to make sure it doesn't fall straight off. I mean, it would be kind of hilarious if it did. Whoever's sitting on the couch is going to get a cardboard tube bonk on the head. But I really don't think it will. It's up there pretty securely. You'll see. So I'm of course also painting with this metallic antique gold acrylic paint, and it honestly, it looks like brass. It did a pretty good job of looking like brass. Okay, so here I go wrapping my fairy lights. I'm thinking, how am I going to get those in there without them all springing out and showing? So I wrapped them around one of those big craft sticks, and then I couldn't get it off the craft stick, and I had to break the craft stick to get it out. But that way, coiled up that way, the wire, I felt, would stay in place and stay inside a little better. And I did hit it with a little dab of hot glue in a couple of places to hold that wire inside, and to hold the part that leads to the battery pack. I wanted to put it on top of, because you see it from underneath. You don't see the top because it's pretty high up on the wall, and a lot of it is behind the picture. I mean, do y'all think that looks like a gift wrap tube and 2 spice caps? Because that's what it is. But this also gave me an opportunity to see if I would like to invest in a real one, which I'm sure would work better, and it would be a lot less ridiculous. But that was just a fun thing I decided to do. Kind of reminded me of when I was a little girl and I used to make Barbie beds out of detergent boxes. Use what you got. All right, Soko Fruit Laurel Swag. Soko is Syracuse ornament company. All right, this swag, I looked up the value, and I couldn't find one exactly. And if they're still gold and they're in perfect condition, oh, it reminds me of my logo. See that? they're worth something. But when I bought this one, it was already painted green. So, you know, what's a girl got to do? She's got to paint something. If something sits still around me very long, it's going to get painted. I love to paint. This is chalk paint in the color Plaster, which is just a really nice off-white color. Keep in mind that when you're at thrift stores, you can see that gold, resin, acrylic, plasticky kind of stuff. You see it practically every time you go to a thrift store. You're going to see a piece of that. Well, now the next time you see some of it, imagine what it would look like if it were painted to look like an architectural, chippy, weathered, aged looking piece. Now there's a lot of steps to get this to looking what I want it to look like, but I knew for sure we were covering up the green. So here I go with my plaster colored chalk paint, and I just had, there's a lot of little angles in there, but you know, don't look at it as a job. Look at it as just relaxing time. It's a whole lot more pleasant than you know, doing dishes, or well, maybe some of y'all love doing dishes. I don't love doing dishes. I do them because it's what Jesus wants me to do and I need to do, but I'd rather be doing this, I'll tell you that. Okay, look at this kind of stuff. These were inspiring finishes to me. I like the little bit of turquoise you can see on one of those. I've been calling that hazelnut, but it's nutmeg brown, and I paid 50 cents for it a lot of years ago, and it'll never run out. I'll have it the rest of my life. When I'm 90 years old, I'll still be using out of that nutmeg bottle, I'm pretty sure. So I decided I was going to let that brown color be part of the layering, part of the system, part of the effect. So you just need a little bitty bit on your brush. I think that's where you get in trouble, is if you think you got to load that brush up. You don't. Do you see that gold ceramic bowl over there? I get a little bit on my brush, and then I just wipe it and smush my brush around to where it's just barely got any on. It's almost dry. This is, in fact, is called dry brushing method. All right, there's my ice cream bucket green, or ice cream bucket blue, whatever way you want to call it. It's a turquoise color. And I love the way little bits of that are looking as I add that in. So that is just making my heart sing. It's so good. This is the fun part. More fun than the other, but it's all more fun than washing dishes or doing laundry or mopping. Man, I hate to mop. All right, look at the depth and the detail that you can now see so much better than when that thing was painted dark green. I did have it up over a doorway when it was dark green, but I didn't like it, and I knew the whole time I had it up there that I would pull it down and redo it. Now I'm going to go over it with the white wax, Waverly white wax, and this is going to tone it down so that it's not quite as vivid and obvious in the different colors. And this is all just a matter of taste. You just do what you want to do, and you make it look like you want it to look. And if you do a step that it's not perfect and you don't like it, it's just paint. Do something else. Keep doing things to it until it looks like you imagine. Well, there it is, up on the wall in my foyer. And this is like if you're standing in my foyer looking toward my living room. One of my daughters reminds me occasionally that you don't have to put decor on every square inch of your walls. And I said, well, I know that, smarty pants, but I'm a maximalist and I like it. So, oh my goodness. I just think that looks 1,000 times better than either gold or the hideous green that it was painted. It wasn't hideous, it just wasn't great. Antique round paintbrush. You know what's really gorgeous? Old paintbrushes. You know what's really expensive? Old paintbrushes. And they're hard to find. So I just put on my thinking cap and I thought, why can I not make something that looks like that? Well, wooden kitchen utensils. If you work really hard, you can pull the original utensil part off of it and you're left with a pretty little handle. And for the brush part, you can use synthetic hair. I'm not kidding, y'all. It was only like $2 at Dollar General. And I thought, I think that would work. The little wooden cups I got in a Ziploc bag at a thrift store for about $2. There was over a dozen in there. Well, I have screwed through the little cup into the handle, and then I have doubled up some thicknesses of that hair, and used little tiny rubber bands to do it. And I used watered down antique wax. That's like using stain without any of the discomfort, because this is water washable. It's so easy. I cracked the base of my little handle trying to get that metal part out, but you can see where I have doubled up the hair. And yes, it was unmanageable. It was wild. It was going everywhere. But I decided I wanted to kind of taper it down all the way around. And then I hot glued it up into the little cup, and I speckled it with a toothbrush loaded with paint. And I'll swanny, that looks like it might have actually been a vintage antique paintbrush. It's hanging there with that woven handled little whisk brush. That was from an Amish village that I went to in an Amish market. And then the other whisk brush is very old, and the round paintbrush is just available at Lowe's if you would like to have one of those. And if you would like to have one of an antique paintbrush, you can just make one. And there's some Little House on the Prairie books and Jesus on a fan. Okay, so I got real excited after I did my paintbrush, and I was like, okay, I believe I can do a little primitive broom, a little whisk broom. Look at some of these. They're gorgeous, but I never see those in real life. I mean, maybe if I was digging in an antique store. Okay, look at that two-pronged fork. I paid $2 for it. You can see the marker on it. And I already had a little whisk broom that I had done a craft to. Well, let me tell you, if I was on a desert island and I needed a really strong utensil, I should have, or would need to take that $2 fork thing, because it's the strongest thing in the entire world that's ever been made, because I could not get the metal thing out. And then, well, I decided the way that I was going to attach it, I was going to have to get down to the wood part. So I, cracked off all the metal, and then I decided, okay, I'm going to take my drill and I'm going to drill a hole into it. Okay, it took Herculean effort to get that little soldered part off. That was very hard to do. But I finally drilled all the way through, and I had to take the wire off the top of my little whisk broom, the wire that came on it. Well, I glued the piece of wood back into it, and then I had to do something to tighten up all those broom straws around the top. So I took my twine and secured it with a little hot glue and wrapped it around about 11 times. And I thought, well, since I can't get that metal thing off, I'll just drill the hole all the way through the wood, and I'll let it stick all the way down into the part where, it begins to fan out and be the actual broom. And that actually did make it even stronger than I was thinking. So, have you ever been on the struggle bus with a project? I felt like I was on the struggle bus with this project. I wanted it to work, and I was determined to make it work, and it did. But I felt defeated that I couldn't get the metal out of that handle. I wanted just the handle, but this turned out better. Sometimes if you're on the struggle bus, just do what you can do and go with it, because it might turn out even better than what you had first planned. you got to be flexible. You got to be open-minded with the craft. Okay, so I'm securing the last bit of twine, and then I'm putting a big, massive glob. Oh, by the way, the little trigger broke on my hot glue gun, so I'm having to just push the glue stick through it with my other hand to make the glue come out. Oh, because, you know, they only cost $2. I could go get another one, but you know, who can remember to do that? All right, this whole thing has got to look 100 years old. So I'm just using straight up, not even watered down antique wax on this thing. But I decided that if I would water it down a little bit in the straw, it would run down into the straw area a little bit better. I had already painted the stitches. The stitches were some kind of terrible lime green, so I had painted the stitches pink on a previous craft that I used, that little hand. I guess I paid maybe $3 or $4 for that little hand whisk broom at Dollar General or somewhere like that. But I did go ahead and try to get a good, thorough coverage of that antique wax all over it, because I did want it to look old. I did want it to look like it had really aged and darkened up. It had a hole and it had a piece of leather, but when I tried to put the leather back on, it broke, so I ended up using twine, which is absolutely still fine with me. And I've got a roll of leather somewhere, but I still don't have all my stuff sorted out from the gigantic house shift, is what I'm calling it, where we all played musical chairs with our bedrooms and rooms, and we all moved around for a whole year, so that my daughter Olivia and her husband and her newborn baby could stay with us for a little while for that year. And it was worth it, and it was good, but it was very challenging. And I'm just now getting my stuff back in order. But they found such a good little house to live in. I'm so happy that they found that. You see me coming back with some white wax just to give a variation of color. And I'm even going to sand some places all the way back down to the wood, just so that it looks like it might have lived a life of some kind. And I did hang it with my other vintage kind of utensils. I'm going to go back and I'm going to do some more coats on the straw part, because I think I could probably improve the way that looks a little bit. But on the whole, I feel like it was a successful project. It did make me struggle a little bit, and you know, it was making me think of all the farm words, but I didn't say any, but I thought them, because it was ridiculously hard to get that to drill through. Oh, I love to decoupage. This decoupage tray was so sweet. You know, I'm showing you a Pinterest image just to show you all the possibilities of decoupage and tray. Found the little 2 trays with 3 wooden spoons for $2.99, and they had put several big strips of the weakest masking tape I've ever experienced in my life. I only did one of these trays. I'll save the other tray for another fun project another time. Look at these beautiful little napkins. I sometimes get napkins from eBay, sometimes from Temu, but this green and white, it wasn't quite long enough, so I decided it wouldn't matter a whit or a bit if I just turned it diagonally, just to make sure that I didn't need to piece it. I didn't want to piece it. It wouldn't have mattered if I did, but I didn't want to. Okay, so I was noticing that it looked like the dark wood was going to make it look too dark. I wanted that white part to be whiter. So I took my gesso paint, that I really, really want to call it gesso, because that's what it looks like. English is crazy. So it's quick drying, and it's acrylic and all that. So about the time I got it painted on, it was dry enough, just in a few more minutes, to go ahead and layer up some Mod Podge on there. And it is matte finish. And I really tried not to get any Mod Podge on the edges or up on the inner inside that I wanted to remain the wood color. But alas, I did get some in there, and I had to scrape and scrape to get it off. But, you know, like I say, it's still more fun than laundry. So, who's complaining? Oh, that tissue, the napkin ply, one ply of napkin is like a cobweb. It is so fragile. Be very careful pressing it down into the corner. In fact, I had to go back and repair it a little bit with a little bit more glue on the tip of my soft little paintbrush. And you see me using different kinds of scrapers and palettes. And oh, don't let any glue get on your instrument, or it will tear your little thin ply. Okay, I did let it dry a good long time so that I would be less likely to rip it to pieces. And I took a sharp little X-Acto knife and my ruler, and I did cut right along through there. And came off pretty well, but next time I do this, I'm going to be more careful and maybe use a skinnier little paintbrush to get right up next to the edges, because you see I'm having to scrape a little bit of that off. That's okay. This is the way life is in crafting. You know, just roll with the punches, babe. All right, got that all trimmed off. Now I'm going to go over the top of it with a little bit more Mod Podge so that it will be more likely to stay put. I mean, I don't plan on doing anything rough, and I'm certainly not going to get it wet or anything. It's just decor, but that will help keep it in place. All right, now it's time to play house. It is, you know, decorating for grown-ups is like playing house when you're a little kid. Except now you get to do things in real life. Okay, I have a nail that stays in the middle of my mantle all the time, and one on each end for hanging different garlands and things. So I'm having to make sure it goes behind my nail. Remember those tiny little bowls, the set of 3 bowls that I thrifted recently? I think they look like Yellowware bowls, but they had candles in them. And someone gave me the greatest, more than one of y'all gave me a great hint, said put them in the freezer and the burnt down candle wax will just come straight out. And it was a miracle. It did. And I didn't have to melt it or burn my fingers or anything. Now remember this, that little set of trays came with wooden spoons, and they're just the right size to look like mixing bowl spoons for those little bowls. That tickles me. Oh, I just think that's the funniest. So cute. I guess I could add something. Give me some ideas of little tiny somethings that I could put in the bowls. I don't really want to cover up the spoons, but maybe there's a little something that could go in the bowls. I'm imagining dry beans, but that doesn't seem quite right. Give me your ideas of things I could put in the bowls. Oh, that's my favorite pattern, that one right there. I love it. But they're all cute. Decoupage is one of my favorite kinds of crafts, favorite things to do. You can just, the possibilities are endless. Do all kinds of things with decoupage. Vintaged toy barn. I have disobedient dogs, so I have to do things to keep the dogs off my furniture. Now, I looked up vintage doll houses, vintage toy barns to get some color ideas. You saw that Pinterest image just now. But this little, my grandchildren love it. I think it's a Melissa and Doug little horse stable. They love it. They play with it all the time. But look at the cold yellow. That's the coldest yellow I've ever seen in my life. I want this thing to look 100 years old. So I'm taking my ice cream bucket green, and I'm going to make the main body of this little toy barn. It's wood. It's very sturdy. It's delightful. It's good. Oh, did I ever tell you why I even mentioned that I had disobedient animals? I put things like this that are sitting in my living room anyway. I put this on the furniture that I don't want the dog to stick one paw onto. Oh, well, I've actually got my dog, and then my son Sam has a little precious little lab that we love. She's so sweet. But they will both get up on any furniture that they can possibly get by with getting on. If they think they can get by with getting on any upholstered furniture, they will. And I do allow them on my leather couch because I know I can clean the couch and it's not as bad, not as terrible as the upholstered furniture. So I wish I was working in the screen so you could see what I'm doing, but I'm taking watered down antique wax, and I'm going over the whole roof of it, and then I'm going to go over everything else, but not the inside. I didn't change the inside of this little thing. I could always go back and do the inside, but not. Oh, there's a big blob of green. Got that off, but would have had to. It's okay if there's some imperfections and blobs occasionally, but that one blob was just a bit too far. It was too much. So the watered down vintage dark wax is giving me a look of age and grime and just a more natural patina, which I feel will look a lot more like my color scheme and my decor and the rest of everything that's already in my living room. So if I'm going to have to use things like toys and baskets and all kinds of things to keep the disobedient dogs off my furniture, because they won't get up there beside a toy like that. They just won't. I mean, they could fit, but they won't do it if there's something like a basket or a toy. It's crazy. So I'm doing this not for the children's sake, because they really don't care what color it is. They just love to play with the toys that I find for them, and it delights me to watch them play. But if I'm going to be looking at it, I want it to at least match the rest of my house. You see how that antique wax gave that such a pretty color, such a pretty tone. I mean, it's pretty fresh as well, but I'm going for vintage looking. So here I go with my little fuzzed up craft paintbrushes, going back over it with a dry brush to take a little bit of it off. But then, there's lots of sides and angles in different places in this barn, and I noticed that I did get it a little heavier on one of the sides, but that's okay. Variety's good. All right, rubber stamp. It's time to add a little crackle effect. I had mentioned in another video that you could use a paper towel to, if it looked too dark, too heavy, you could bring some of that back off with a paper towel, or you could just put your whole entire hand right on it and it will achieve the same effect, same purpose. I'm a very hands-on, no pun intended, very hands-on crafter. I mean, it's going to be on me. Probably going to get a little bit on my clothes. Probably going to see it somewhere around the wrist and elbow area. When I think I've gotten it all off, I'll be sitting somewhere in public in a restaurant, and there'll be a big stripe of paint down my arm that I will not have even had any idea was there. Just kind of who I am at this point. I love the red shingles so much better now that the antique wax is on it. Okay, so that's my pretty little chair that I paid something like $25 for from Facebook Marketplace. And if you look those up, they're pretty pricey. It's an Ashley Furniture chair, and brand new. I think it was $300. I don't know why this girl sold it to me for so cheap, but I didn't question it. I just took it, gave her the money, and took that chair. But look how much more that little piece of wooden toy thing. Oh, look how much better it looks with the rest of my world. It blends in. I'm going to enjoy watching the children play with it. For this craft, we're going to make a liner for a laundry cart that Olivia found while we were thrifting. She paid about $5 for it. It's identical to this Pinterest picture, and I used that as my inspiration, but my fabric is a blue ticking stripe. Now I laid it down, and you can, just to get an idea of how tall my fabric is, because I want to make sure that I have enough fabric to fold over the top edge like a cuff and still be able to see the right side of the fabric showing on the outside of the cuff. Now, the four sides of your cart, you're going to want to measure those four sides, plus make it longer so that you have room to make a square bottom and a cuff that will go over the top edge of your cart. And in my situation, I'm just going to treat it all as one big piece of fabric that I fold over and stitch one long stitch down the side. You can see here I have folded in half, and now I'm going to stitch. I also need to make a seam across the short end of my folded fabric to close it up and make a square bottom. And then you're going to want to look at a brown paper grocery bag or a lunch sack or something to get an idea of how you need to make your corners. I'll try my best to explain how to do it, but if you make each of the bottom corners of the flat piece you just stitched, make it into a point, and then turn it inward toward the inside and stitch it in place just so that it doesn't move. It's going to create a square bottom. Now that might blow your mind, and that might be just a little bit of an advanced step, but it really isn't. You can figure it out. If I can figure it out, you can too, but you might have a better idea of how to do it if you just look at a brown grocery bag, because that's how they work. All right, so I can see here now, I've laid it beside my cart, and I can tell that I'm going to have plenty of fabric to roll over to the outside of the cart and make a cuff at the top. At the point where the top edge, before you roll it downward toward the outside, I put a line of stitching like a little hem, just so it would stay. I would always know where the edge of my cuff is. Now it looks a little wrinkly now, but I'll get it straightened out here in a minute, but I'm just checking to make sure it does fit. And now I've got to figure out how to get it around those handles. I'm going to have to cut the cuff in a split so that those handles can rise up and the cuff still go around it. So I marked with pins where that little cuff needed to be, where the split needed to be, and I just zigzagged the raw edges to make sure that it didn't fray. This little bitty sewing machine I'm using, I paid $14 for it at a thrift store, and it is loud and noisy and handy. I stitched a little short piece of ribbon onto each side of that split so that I could make a cute little bow to tie it together. And in my case, I made a good bit of fabric, was able to tuck down into it, and I thought that would maybe give a little better structure to the entire thing. If I wanted to have taken it out and ironed it, it would have been cuter, but You know, I just wasn't in the ironing mood that day, and so it's going to have a more casual look. And this is on my front steps, and while it was out there, Ben looked at it and he said, "Is that thing meant for yard work?" And I said, "No, honey, I'm just taking pictures of it." He said, "Oh, I wondered." He's told me before he has literally no idea what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in my world. But that tickled me. I guess I could roll it around and pick up those pine cones. I see plenty of them. We have lots of pine trees, and the pine cones are just constant. Okay, this last one is a design idea. You're not going to have to do a single thing except just use an old suitcase. I wanted my grandchildren to be able to get to their children's books, and I love to read to them. And we don't often get still and quiet enough. It's such a ruckus going on anytime the kids are here. But if I can get just, one or two of them at a time at my house, they will let me read to them, and I love doing it. Okay, I've got a stack of puzzles and coloring book kind of stuff back there on top of that garden stool. So I went and found another old suitcase that I had taken all the way out to my shed, but I came back with it, and that's going to be for coloring books and puzzles. Those wooden puzzles are really wonderful. I love those. And I stacked them up, and you can see that's the corner where the children keep their toys. Well, I keep their toys there for them, and the children know they're there, and Ella watches over it very carefully. I cannot wait to read your comments and hear what you think of this group of cottage thrift flips. I love the comment section. I love getting to know all of you, and I appreciate you, and you're my friends, and I love you, and I do pray for you. When you come to my mind, I just ask that the Lord blesses your life in Jesus' name.